If someone had told me a year ago that I would end up rediscovering my identity, all the while going through a crisis, I wouldn't have believed them. Not only was I struggling to come to terms with feelings for a close male friend, Charlie, but I was also roped into a situation that I wasn't ever a part of. It took weeks for it to resolve, weeks of mistrust that I could feel brewing in Charlie's eyes, and the innumerable number of heartaches that I was sure I had unknowingly inflicted upon Charlie. Yes, I might have been at fault, but I was still consumed by the sublime emotion to make it right with Charlie, to make sure he was safe and sound and felt protected with me by his side. Maybe it was for the very reason that when we walked out of the cafeteria, I couldn't care less about the whispers that I heard behind our backs. It was more than obvious what they were talking about. It surprised me that although I was slightly bothered by how annoying they sounded, I couldn't care less. When we were a safe distance away, I nudged Charlie's hand with my own. It was a small enough movement to not catch either Isaac's or Tao's attention, and I was kind of glad about that. I also kind of hoped that Charlie and I were alone at this moment. When Charlie turned to look at me, I sort of forgot how to form proper words. It was almost always the same case with him. It was hard keeping a grip on myself whenever I was near him. "I will go to the medical room," Charlie said, more to me than his friends. "Can I come with you?" I asked. You don't have to," he replied, flushing a little. I immediately thought that was a good look on him. Red suited him. I smiled in return and hoped it wasn't too awkward. "I would like to, though." I looked down at the fresh bruise on his arm. "We can go together, if you want." Tao and Isaac had excused themselves by then. It was just us two in the hallway. Charlie looked around, and then agreed in defeat. I would have tried to take offense, but at least he was smiling. "Just try not to get bored." I gave a small chuckle in return. "I don't think I could ever get bored around you, Charlie." I followed after him and mapped out his exposed skin for any other bruises. It was alarming how easily I found another one on his hand. It also infuriated me that he was subjected to that. I remember the first instance when I found out about this entire situation. It was in the changing room, and Harry was giggling about something behind my back. I wasn't interested in what my teammates were talking about, but when I heard a little whisper of Charlie's name, I couldn't help but perk up. Not only Charlie was a good friend of mine by then, but he had also harbored some self-doubt in me about my sexuality and everything I understood about myself until that point. It made sense that even the mention of his name was enough to catch my attention. But the conversations between my teammates didn't sound as charming as I considered Charlie. Instead, they were mean and disgusting. Immediately, I asked them to shut their mouths and stop acting like old gossiping ladies. Now, it was true that I couldn't stand the sight of Harry, but now even my other teammates had started to get on my nerves.
"Oh, now ain't that ironic, Nick?"
"What's ironic about me asking you to shut your mouth and be respectful?"
"Well, for someone who disclosed this information about him in the first place, you sure as hell sound defensive."
It was then that I found out about the rumors and how I was forcefully involved in it. None of it made sense. What did make sense then, however, was the little word I had seen etched on Charlie's locker: Fago. Desperate and scared for my friend, I often spent a good 2 minutes in front of the locker to erase it with my compass. But it was useless. By the time Charlie and I had our final confrontation at the party, it was still slightly visible. If one checked it right now, they would still find the F there, as I watched Charlie's bruises get stitched and him wincing every now and then. I hope he would have the heart to forgive me. If I knew so much was happening, I could have stopped it, or tried to, or something. "It's done," Charlie said, with his perfect little smile. I smiled in return and carefully plucked out the fallen petal from his curly hair. "Hungry?" I asked. "Don't say no, because I sure as hell am." Charlie seemed a little uncomfortable again. He always wore that look whenever we talked about eating or food. I had begun to notice a pattern in these kinds of exchanges between us. I wonder if Charlie's friend had also started noticing the same. "I think I'll skip," he said. There it was. "How about a little salad? Or maybe a milkshake?" "Salad will do, I guess." I nudged his hand with my own and gave him a smile. "You can share with me if you want to." He seemed more relaxed now. "Yeah, we can do that." I smiled a little and pulled him from the medical room and out of that smelly hallway. Let's go then. Maybe then I can come hang out with you at your house. That would be very nice. He agreed. Ben's still messaging me, Charlie said. We were in his bedroom playing games when we heard the gentle ping from his phone first. It was easy to ignore them, but now Charlie looked a little disturbed and uncomfortable. I looked over his shoulder and at the litany of the messages the said boy had sent him since this morning. Most of them sounded desperate. He sounded whiny, the kind of person who made a mistake, didn't apologize for it, but wanted to be treated the same anyway. I often wonder what Charlie saw in him to date him. Charlie deserves so much better, and someone much better than Ben Hope. Maybe someone like me. Maybe. Perhaps. I wasn't sure. I wasn't even sure about myself. I warned him not to, I muttered. The sheer audacity. He has always been like this, Charlie replied and switched off his phone. That was one of the reasons we didn't spend much time together. But you guys were dating, I muttered, a little hesitant because I wasn't sure if he wanted to discuss that part of his life with me, right now or ever. We had discussed his relationship with Ben a little bit during the camping trip, but with Ben being a constant part of our lives, he never really sounded like a part of the past. He always popped up in our conversations. He was unavoidable. We met on his condition, Charlie replied, a little dryly. If he asked me to meet him in the library, I would meet him, but if I asked him the same, he would always make excuses, so we only met on his terms. If he felt desperate enough to kiss me, we would kiss. That was the only kind of interaction we had. Always. Oh, I muttered. I never thought Ben to be a nice guy, but my perception of him wasn't always this bad. He was just another classmate. Charlie nodded. Never kissed anyone but him, and still. He stopped and poked his thigh. He was kissing girls, and there I was, proving my loyalty, even when he treated me like I was some... He sounded agitated once again. Hey, I said, and tentatively took his hand in my own. His skin was softer than my own, and when I rubbed his palm with a thumb, he seemed a little less agitated than he looked a minute ago. His eyes were still trained on our joined hands when I spoke again. My eyes were fixed on the flush on his cheeks. It was always distracting to see him like that. It was flattering I could pull out that kind of reaction from him. Breathe with me, it's all right. He breathed a little and then shrugged. I don't ever want to be with someone like him. He made everything worse. I wanted to reply that I was sure I wasn't like Ben, but didn't know if it was the right time. Charlie was surely still heartbroken, and I didn't want to add my feelings and conflicts on top of it all. Well, we will make sure that never happens then. I rubbed the skin between his thumb and forefinger. His eyes seemed to follow each movement. It's going to be all right. Charlie shrugged again and looked at me. I want him to stop bothering me. Should I talk to him about it? I had already once warned Ben about his behavior, and even gone as far as to warn him to stay away from Charlie if he didn't want people to find out about him. But it didn't look like it worked. I couldn't imagine what else he wanted. Surely he didn't think Charlie would return to him. Would Charlie return to him? I hope not. It was only when he smiled that I noticed the lack of distance between us. But neither he nor I pulled back. I couldn't help but bring a hand to his face to brush away the curls over his eyes. When he didn't move away from my touch, I brushed my hand against his soft curls. I believed it was because of the touch, or because, maybe, it just seemed the perfect moment. But before either of us knew about it, we had leaned closer and pressed our lips together. The room was bathed in the soft afterglow of the sunset, but even then this intimate touch between us seemed to sparkle more than any sunsets I had felt on my skin over the years. In just those moments, I seemed to come alive, as if the previous conversation between us hadn't dampened my mood or my energy. Charlie seemed to have that kind of reaction over me. I wondered if it was the same for Charlie. I hope it was. It kind of seemed important to me. I believed if his sister hadn't barged into the bedroom some minutes later, we wouldn't have stopped. Oh, hi, Charlie's boyfriend. He's not my boyfriend, Charlie replied, a little embarrassed. It's Nick, Tori. If it weren't for the charming flush over his cheeks, I wasn't sure what I would have felt. And even though the kiss felt like the perfect little thing between us, I couldn't help but feel a little worried. Was this what I wanted to do with Charlie? Was this what my attraction to him over the past few months was about? Go away, Tori. Although I was a little conflicted, I was enjoying his interaction a little too much. Hi, Tori. I waved a little at her. Nice. Mom's cooked dinner, and she wants you both downstairs. I'm not really hungry, Charlie muttered and looked at me. Just a little. Tori and I shared a look. I knew she knew. A little is okay, she replied and told us to be downstairs soon. She left us alone and closed the door after herself. Charlie looked as shy and as nervous as I felt. Nick, he said before he could leave for dinner, I am sorry for doubting you. At that time, he nervously continued, I was scared, I couldn't think straight, and so I assumed the worst of you. Of course, that doesn't justify my behavior, but I will apologize anyway. I am sorry if I hurt you. Charlie, I said, smiling a little and holding out a hand for him. It's all right, really. It made sense you were upset. When he took my hand, I rubbed it again. I wasn't sure why, but I liked doing it. With a look of Charlie's face, I assumed he did too. I know this is not the time, and that this will take some time, but I still hope you're well, Charlie. If you ever need to talk to someone about anything, or anyone, I'm always available, alright? Call me, message me, whatever you prefer. But don't. I suddenly looked at his wrists. Keep them to yourself. Charlie didn't seem to notice it, so it was all good. I will. Thanks, Nick. I gave him a small smile. I am hungry. He didn't seem as enthusiastic about food, but he gave a small laugh anyway. Let's get you fed then. And you too, I couldn't help but mention. Yeah, he replied, a little less enthusiastically. Me too. I was ashamed to admit I ignored Charlie for the past couple of days. Soon after the dinner at his place, I had returned home with a stupidly made excuse and ran to my home. I assumed I wasn't feeling overwhelmed after that little kiss that we shared, but as the dinner continued and I watched Charlie struggle with his food and immediately thought how much I wanted to stay by his side and make sure he was all right, the feelings overwhelmed me so much that I knew I had to leave before something else happened. I was feeling too much too suddenly. Then, like a coward, I stayed in my bedroom for the whole weekend and ignored a few messages from Charlie, only to sit down in front of my laptop to do quizzes. Quizzes for what? One must wonder. Quizzes to see what I was. My history field was filled with "Am I gay?" quizzes. It looked so pathetic at one point that I wanted to just get under my comforters and cry until it was all over. I didn't want to think, but maybe that was the reason why yesterday, in the rain, I rushed to Charlie's home, desperate as hell. I rang the doorbell and hoped that it would be him who'd answered it. Right on cue, Charlie opened the door and looked surprised to find me there. Hi, I said, and he invited me in. Hi, he asked with a small laugh. He gave me a towel and wiped away the droplets on my shoulders with one end of it. Are you all right? Despite me being mum for a while, he looked happy to see me. I couldn't help but think maybe this was worth it. I am fine, how are you? He looked just as thin as I remembered him days earlier. I wondered if he had eaten anything today. I am fine, he answered, and asked if I wanted to come into the bedroom. What was so important? It's raining. It's pouring, actually. You'll get sick. I said, it's us. Charlie looked confused when he turned to me after closing the door. What? Charlie, can I kiss you? Although he still looked a little confused, he still shyly answered a small yes. I took it as a cue and kissed him. Thank God he kissed me back. Charlie and I, started dating. In secret first. I promised him that I would soon tell others about us, but I just needed some time. I must have looked worried when I said that, because he quickly pressed his thumb between my eyebrows and told me that he would wait for me to get comfortable at my own pace. As overwhelmed as I felt about his kindness, I couldn't help but grab his hand and kiss his palm. "I will not disappoint you, Charlie," I said. "Honestly, I don't think you're capable of doing that, Nick." He smiled, and I thought, well, I needed to make sure I did not break the trust he had placed on my shoulders. No one would be more disappointed in myself than me. My thoughts of that were still fresh when I received a message from Charlie a few days later. He had sent me a picture, and it was of me with a compass, standing in front of his locker. I knew what I was doing, erasing the ugly word that someone had written on the locker, but Charlie didn't. The accompanying message asked a simple question. "Can you please explain what's going on here?" I didn't know who clicked the picture, but when Charlie informed me it was Ben, I knew who was behind it. The guy, no wonder, wanted things to end between us, even though we had just started. I told Charlie that it wasn't what it looked like, and that I would explain everything in person to him. Though he had seen my message, he didn't reply. 10 minutes later, he sent a thumbs up, and that was it. I asked if we could meet right then, and Charlie replied that he was with his friends. His tone, even through the messages, sounded less cold and more sad. I was worried for him. I told him that it wasn't what it looked like, and that I was erasing the word on his locker. It sounded bad. The conversation sounded like it needed to happen face to face for it to work. I cringed when I sent the message, but hoped that Charlie would understand my intention and the actual reason I was there. Rugby practice had just ended when Charlie messaged me again. I checked it, and then immediately ran towards the boys' washroom. Apparently, Ben had cornered him again and was demanding him to hear him out. Mrs. Singh was with me when I told her that the washroom was locked and that Ben was sure to hurt him. "I don't trust him, Mrs. Singh," I said. "Has he done this before?" she asked, a little calmly yet sternly. "Not like this, no," I answered and pushed the door. It wouldn't budge. I looked at her in worry. I could hear Ben and Charlie talking behind the door, and I was sure as hell growing agitated. This was getting out of hand. "Charlie? Charlie!" I said, and pushed at it again. "I have said this so many times," she muttered and banged on the door in irritation. She had some work to finish, and I had just involved her in teen drama. She probably hoped she was anywhere but here. "Ben, open the door right this instant." The chatter stopped behind the door. It was stupid. Ben was going to see hell after this, I vowed. "Open this door, or I am informing your parents of this. This is unacceptable." The door opened. I pushed past Ben to look for Charlie. He looked a little flushed, but still somewhat composed. I ran my hand through his hair and checked for any injuries on his face. There were none, but I still asked him if he was all right. Behind me, I could hear Mrs. Singh barreling on and on to Ben, no doubt upset at his behavior. I would let her know he had been bothering Charlie for weeks now, and she would ensure he got his fill. She was smart like that. I'm all right," Charlie replied, sniffling a little. "Are you sure?" I touched his right elbow. It looked redder than the rest of his face, and I was seconds away from slapping Ben. This was the most violent I had been in a while. I was upset and angry. "Yeah," he answered. "Nick, can you just..." He licked his bottom lip, looked over my shoulder. "Just tell me what you were doing in that picture, and I just want to hear that, nothing else." "I will tell you." I told him. "Let's get out of here first." Charlie nodded. He looked exhausted, and I had half a mind to ask him if he wanted to eat something. Mrs. Singh asked Charlie if he was all right, and he replied that he was. When we walked past Ben, I made sure to push him into the wall. Mrs. Singh chided me a little, but I still warned Ben that if people found out about his secret, then he had no one but himself to be upset with. He looked spooked now, probably worried that I would finally do it. When Charlie and I were a safe distance away from there, I started telling him about what had actually happened. Charlie didn't look too upset at me, so I was glad we were not on the wrong foot here. I couldn't help but try to erase that. It just didn't feel right. "That I'm a fag?" he asked. "What?" I stopped and held his hand before he could move away. "Charlie, what was that?" "You know I could never..." I stopped and sighed. "Charlie, did he do something?" "He didn't do anything," he answered, and sounded a little bitter, "except what he does all the time. He said that he knew we were dating and that I should not get too comfortable. because you are sure going to get fed up dating a fag. That's not it. I will not leave you, Charlie. Not until you want me to. I turned to him and held both his hands in my own. I have no problem with you being gay, Charlie. I like you, I said, and let the weight of the words settle between us. I liked him. Did I love him? It was far too soon to say that, but I knew I liked Charlie. I wanted to be with him. I wanted to be one of the reasons he smiled or laughed, and I wanted to be there to wipe his tears when he needed someone by his side. I liked him. And Ben, he didn't know anything. He held no respect for anything, and that is why he was going to die a lonely man. That was what he deserved. Charlie, in fact, there's something I'd like to confess, I began, now a little more nervous. Charlie, I am not straight. I'm not gay either. I know that. I am bi, Charlie. But I like you so much. It's impossible for me to think about anyone else when I'm with you. It's like there's nothing else to think about but you. I was still holding onto his hands, so I rubbed them to make sure he was listening to me. I didn't want to make this moment about myself. Charlie clearly needed more attention than I did. But I still wanted him to know that I liked him and that we were the same, in more ways than one. I will never hurt you, Charlie, I promise. Out of all the things, I fear being like Ben. To my horror, there were tears in my eyes. Charlie, for his part, earnestly looked at me. He seemed as affected by my confession as I was confessing those words. I squeezed his hands. I am lucky to be your boyfriend, Charlie. I will do everything to not be like Ben. Nick, he said, and he sounded a little sad. Charlie. He came a little closer and pulled me in for a hug. I hugged him in return, worried that if I took too long, I would ruin this moment. You'll never be like him. I held him around his waist, grateful to hear that. You can never be like him, Nick. Never. It was late evening, and we were at Charlie's place. Tori was in her bedroom, so we were left undisturbed for most of the afternoon. At some point, a little exhausted, we took a nap and woke up late in the evening. Charlie was still sleeping on my chest when I woke up, so I did what any creepy boyfriend would do. I kissed his forehead and played a little with his curls. Charlie snuggled a little more into my chest. When I rubbed his temples, the sight seemed to do something wondrous in it. Devoted as I felt to him, I couldn't help but gently rub his head again. Charlie had complained that he often got nightmares, owing to the past bullying. It meant that he wasn't sleeping well either. I believe this was the best way to ensure that he had his sleep. Around the same time, sometime around 7, Tori knocked at the door. When I didn't say anything, she peeked her head inside and asked if we were decent. I blushed, but replied that we were. Is he still sleeping? She asked and walked inside. Oh, he is. This is adorable. I smiled at her. Hi, Tori. He likes you a lot, Nick, she said. Don't break his heart. I will not, I promised. Thank you. He seems happy these days. I mean, it's an improvement from, well, the past few weeks. So, thank you. Mom and Dad are probably just as grateful as I am. She grabbed a chair and sat by the bed. I am trying my best, I replied. She hummed and nodded. Are things good between you two? I gave her a small nod. We are trying, honestly. Watch out, though. He drools. I know. I gave a small laugh. She smiled a little and then stood up. I will leave you, she said. Mom and Dad will be back soon, so I take this as a warning. They will want the door open. I understand. Suddenly, she grabbed one of Charlie's limp wrists and showed it to me. Make sure he is eating, Nick. He avoids eating a lot. I try my best. She nodded. Has he talked about, She went silent and pulled up her sleeve. She did it so gently that Charlie didn't even move. No wonder she often said he could sleep through an earthquake. Take care of him, Nick. He is my little brother. I smiled and pulled down the sleeves over his wrists. I rubbed a hand over Charlie's head when he wiggled a little over my chest. I will make sure he is all right. Thanks, she said, as she left the bedroom with a little nod. When Charlie woke up again, I told him that I wanted to come out to my friends and family. I am pretty sure David's going to be a pain in my head, but Mom's going to be all right. Imogen should be all right too, I think. "Are you sure?" he asked, a little wide-eyed. He looked so pretty, I couldn't help but kiss him again. "My breath is stinky," he said, and slapped a hand over his mouth before I could kiss him again. "No," he laughed. "I don't mind," I replied, and laughed with him. I kissed a hand over his mouth. "Indirect kiss, Charlie. I won." He giggled. I sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "I am sure," I answered. "I want them to know already, so that then I can announce to the world that you're my boyfriend." "Really?" he asked. I nodded in the tight space. "Yeah," I answered. "Babe," I added thoughtfully, but really only to see his reaction. And well, it was worth it. Mom took it better than my brother David did, but I expected that much. David reeked with homophobia and wouldn't stop giggling over the dinner. It didn't matter how many times Mom hushed him or asked him to keep his mouth shut. He just wouldn't shut up. Arguing with him wasn't worth it. Informing Imogen, though, was both easy and difficult. The difficulty arose because I knew she had feelings for me. It was easy because I was assured about my attraction to Charlie. I knew I wanted to be with him, even if it upset some people. Imogen looked tearful when I told her about it, but she seemed to accept it better than David did. So, well, overall, it went well. Then Charlie asked if we could set up a movie night, and we did just that. All our friends gathered to watch a horror movie. When it was over, Charlie and I sneaked into his bedroom and kissed each other. We were laughing into each other's mouths, and perhaps this was the happiest I had seen him in weeks. Perhaps this was the happiest I had been in weeks too. We fell down on the bed and hugged him. He seemed to fit perfectly next to me. When an overwhelming urge got the best of me, I pulled out my phone and clicked a picture. I asked if he was all right with me posting the picture on my Instagram. Although he didn't say anything, he looked incredibly happy and overwhelmed. So when he kissed me in return, I took that as a gratitude. He didn't need to, I told him. Once I started it, I wasn't planning on stopping. I told him that. I posted the picture and captioned it, "By the way, I am bi." The scars of bullying ran deep, and it was obvious in Charlie's case. I could see glimpses of it in him. By then, bullying had long since stopped, but I could still see Charlie struggling with his odd eating habits, and I knew I needed to show him more love and patience for things to get even slightly better. Thankfully, this seemed like a common mission between his friends and me. The rumors about Ben started by the end of the year. It was neither Charlie nor I who had any hand in it, but as I once told Charlie, my teammates were already doubting Ben, and they perhaps found something else, and the rumors started spreading fast. Ben ended up dating a girl from our class for the next few months, and I couldn't say what his next plans were. Things seemed to pass between Charlie and me, though. Charlie and Nick seem to have found everlasting love. Have you? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force and to stay wholesome.